Welcome to the OpenHearted podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the OpenHearted podcast. I'm your host, Will Wheeler, joined with my main man, Photon John. Kev, sorry. What's going on, brother?
Busy.
Totally.
On tour, moving house, still working.
Yeah, man. So before we got on, so for all of those listening, Kev, myself, we're all moving house. Not that we live in the same. You probably see slightly to the left of me, there's some boxes there.
Yeah.
For those of you viewing online there. So yeah, it has just been crazy couple of weeks. Also too, within the past week or so, we managed to catch up, hey Kev?
Yeah, in person. That was pretty good.
So, yeah, it was good to just catch up. We hadn't seen each other for, how long? Over a year, man, because I think I saw you in person Christmas 21.
Ooh,
yeah, 21.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
It was a bit before we started this podcast. So.
Time flies when you're having fun, yeah?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. But, man, I tell you what, we better call up today's guest. So today we're joined by Gerard Atkinson, all the way from Melbourne. Not Melbourne, from not Outback, somewhere in Victoria there. How are you, my man?
Not too bad. How are you going?
Yeah, good, man. Let's just get this all sorted here. Man, so today what we're going to be covering is gentle advocacy around neurodiversity. So, huge topic there. Something that especially working in this space, I see a lot of, one, advocacy, and I see, two, a lot of people approaching it in a way that's maybe not so gentle, but we'll be able to talk about that in a sec. But before that, what we might do, for anyone listening, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media platforms. We've now got TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Also, too, if you haven't done so, please check out the OpenHeartedSociety.com website. Please subscribe so you can get all of our emailing newsletters, all of that stuff. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, you can check it out at all podcasting platforms. Anything else you want to add on to that, Photon John?
No, except that I would say I'm loving all your shorts lately. They're really good.
Oh, yeah, true. So for anyone who's watching our YouTube channels and all that, I've been, doing a whole bunch of shorts recently. And talking about that, I've actually just pressed play or record on my phone here so I can record what's going on here. But also, to anyone listening who's listening to this live, feel free to ask some questions during the interview here, because I tell you what, it just makes it so much interesting, But anyway, Gerard, man, awesome to see you, my man.
This is here.
Yeah, totally. This is all about you, my man. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, man. You're doing some pretty amazing stuff out there.
Oh, well, where to begin? I mean, I joke that I wear many hats, not literally, although sometimes if I'm dressing up in costume. But my main day job is that I'm a director with ARTD Consultants, which is a consulting firm that specializes in what we call policy and program evaluation. And the easiest way to describe what I do is that the government, they go spend some money on trying to solve a social problem. And then some bright spark comes along and says, well, all that money you spent trying to solve this problem, did it work? And that's usually when my phone rings. And my job is to go in and figure that out. Ask the questions about, firstly, what does it mean for something to work? And then how do we know if it's worked? And this can be through, quantitative data, just looking at, what's been recorded in databases. But oftentimes it means talking with people and trying to understand people's experiences and how that's changed as a result of the program. I also do a lot of economic analysis, so trying to understand, put a dollar value on things that are really hard to put a dollar value on. How do you measure someone's change in mental well-being, for example, in dollar terms? And so that's one part of my work, and I say that's the part that I get paid for. I'm also chair of Reframing Autism, which is a national nonprofit that's dedicated to the idea of providing education and research that's autistic-led, autistic-informed, and helps to support autistic well-being at all life stages. And so they're my two main ones. I'm then on the board of the Social Impact Measurement Network of Australia. And in terms of my background, it's all over the place.
You're doing a hell of a lot, I can tell you that much, mate. Where do you find the time for it, mate?
My calendar is kind of the way that I organize myself. So I'm autistic, late diagnosed, mainly because when I was growing up, there was a very different conception around what autism was and how it manifested in people. And I was also gifted. And so I just got thrown in the gifted bucket, not realizing at the time, and, no one around me realized that perhaps, what I was experiencing was consistent with autism. And it was only a few years ago that, I realized that, the way I was seeing the world and the way I was engaging with the world was vastly different to the neurotypical experience, and that led me to research more and eventually get a diagnosis of autism. And since then, I've been working with the autistic community to try and sort of build the resources, build the understanding, and use my position as somebody who can work closely with government to try and, improve the well-being of autistic people.
Yeah, no, it's actually, and obviously I've met you through the work you're doing in around autism and the neurodiversity community there. But and it needs, people like yourself out there to donate your time sometimes just to be able to, get to that I suppose the level that you and I or everyone expects it to be type of thing, because otherwise who else is going to do it a lot of the time?
Yeah, and one thing that I've seen quite a bit in the community, the neurodivergent community, is the fact that there's a lot of people, great people, who are putting in huge amounts of effort and reaching that point of burnout. So, I feel like if I can add my skills and add my support, I'm also helping those people to continue doing the great work that they do.
Yeah, man, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, man. Burnout in regards to, I think the hardest thing, and I'm going to take it from my perspective of the work that I've been doing, sometimes it can feel that you're putting in so much and you're getting nothing in return for it. And it can be hard. So, even someone reached out to us, last night actually, and said, I love been listening to the podcast. It's sounding great, really enjoying it. And, it's sometimes those real little things that can make a big difference. Because hearing that for us, and, Kevin and I talk about this a lot, we put in a lot of work trying to really grow this and everything. And when you do get that little bit of support from other members of the community, it definitely does, make you feel good and keeps you really wanting to work towards something really good there. Just out of curiosity, reframing autism, where can like some of our listeners probably find a lot of their work, or where's the best place that, are they just in Australia, or what is it all about?
So Reframing Autism is an Australian organization. The resources that we provide are kind of meant to be sort of global in scope. The best place to find it is reframingautism.org.au, the website. We've just revamped it, and the team's done a great job in relaunching the website, and it's now structured in a way that when you hit that landing page, it sort of gives you the option of going through different pathways through the website based on, the reason that you're there. Are you an autistic person who wants to find out more about autistic resources? Are you the parent of an autistic child? Are you a professional working in that space? And so we can direct people to the resources that are going to be most beneficial to them. And these range from, some of our work, which is English translations of key concepts in autism, to translating research that's been done in the space into basically real English, because academic English is quite inscrutable at times.
Totally.
So we try to make some of that key research accessible to the broader community. We've also developed educational resources. So we have self-directed courses in autistic wellbeing. We've also hosted conferences and workshops, and as well as our website, we do have a pretty strong social media presence across the platforms, where we try to provide concise, pithy resources that people can sort of use and share and learn from.
Awesome.
We're sort of based around the idea of really trying to provide autistic-led and autistic-developed supports for the community, and
so
from that perspective to the fore.
If I could just get a little specific there, you sort of mentioned late diagnosis, and which is me, and people in professional fields and whatnot, and burnout happening there. What sort of work do you do in that specific area? That's something I actually struggled with for many years until I finally got diagnosed and learned how to deal.
Yeah, I can't remember all the resources off the top of my head. I believe we've done some stuff around autistic burnout and really trying to sort of address what that is and how it's particularly different to burnout as it's talked about in broader society, because they do manifest. There's some commonalities with burnout, but autistic burnout is sort of intertwined with the nature of being autistic in terms of the way that we engage with the world, particularly the sensory experience of the world, and how that plays into burnout, and as well as how you can recover from burnout, how you can anticipate it. Ideally, the best strategy is not to get into that situation, and that means being able to put in place those mechanisms to identify when things are getting close to that, and being able to be in an environment where you can be supported to sort of pull things back. And we try to create that within our organization and practice what we preach there.
Yeah, cool. No, that's be directing some people your way.
And the cool thing about reframing autism is that I think the thing that I like about you guys, it's about the community. It's built around the community. It's really getting some really good traction. So, it's a credit to yourself and the team at Reframing Autism there, because you're doing the right thing. You know what I mean? But really, anyway, we should really get into what we're come here to talk about. So, when you reached out to me, we were like, man, what do you want to talk about? And you're like, man, let's talk about, gentle advocacy, man. All right. And I was like, okay, that's something different. What is gentle advocacy and why is it important?
So gentle advocacy really underpins how Reframing Autism operates. I can't take credit for the idea, but really, when I started looking into what gentle advocacy is and doing some background research, it's not really been referred to in that sense, those words, but really, for me, it comes back to actually a quote from Victor Hugo in Les Miserables. And he says, nothing is so stupid as to vanquish. The real glory is to convince. And really, that's, to me, something like I've known that quote for years and years, and I've always sort of thought about it as being, that's how I want to engage. It's not sufficient to be right about something, no matter how much evidence you have in the principle. Good advocacy is about being able to change people's minds and bring them around to your perspective. And, gentle advocacy is saying that has to be done gently. You have to think about how you can engage with a person in a way that's going to get them onto your side. And, I've been in situations, both within the neurodiversity advocacy space, but also in other spaces. I used to work in arts advocacy some years ago. And I remember, this was when I lived in the US, and one day I was at Congress and the Senate in the US, and I was in Ted Cruz's office. Now, Ted Cruz was
crazy.
A stump speech on the road, but I was there learning advocacy with some other advocates around arts policy. And I just remember sitting there listening to this advocate speak about how the arts are so important, how the culture is so important, and that we should be supporting the arts and really investing in it. But I could also see that this was just falling on deaf ears. It was the wrong argument, even though from an evidence-based standpoint, it was completely fair. I just knew that with this particular audience, it wasn't going to resonate. And it really got me thinking about how do you get to that point of convincing a person? And it's about finding the arguments that are going to resonate with a person and to build that relationship with them so that when you can make those stronger arguments that are based around, what you're trying to advocate for, they're going to have a receptive ear. And, that's where reframing autism has kind of worked on gentle advocacy. It wants to start from a place of trying to empathize and understand the situations of the stakeholders it wants to engage with. It originated with the idea of, you've got parents who have children who are receiving autism diagnoses, and they're suddenly faced with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of information. Some of it contradictory, some of it, potentially quite detrimental to the short and longer term outcomes for their child. But as a parent, you're being bombarded with information. You don't know. All you want is what's best for your child. You care about your child. You want to take care of them. And we felt we wanted to come from a place of, appreciating that parents are trying to do the best. And one of the things I say is, and this goes for all parents, is, you don't get handed an instruction manual with a baby. We're all trying to learn how to do it on the fly, and, a little appreciation for that, and saying, we understand that, there's a lot of information there, and we want to help guide them to information that comes from autistic lived experience. But particularly with reframing autism, a lot of our staff are autistic parents of autistic children. So they kind of know it personally, but also know what it's like to be a parent in that situation and to parent children. So, that's where gentle advocacy comes to the fore for us, is really trying to get on that same level as the people we're trying to influence and understand, what's driving them and how can we
totally
in a way that's going to be productive. And
yeah, totally. And I think the thing is that, when I think back when I was younger and, getting diagnosed with dyslexia back in the day, I think a parent is just trying to or wanting to do their best for their child, and you're getting bombarded with so much information because, especially back when I was younger, a lot of research probably wasn't done. It was probably more, okay, well, your kid can't read or write, which we now know isn't really the case. But, and there was so many other things that I suppose a lot of the positive stuff that they never really spoke about to my parents. It was very much about, okay, well, your son's not able to do this, he's not able to do that. So that can be really difficult for a parent to probably put their best foot forward to best help their child or something like that. So, why does, gentle advocacy matter then? What's going to, what's going to be the outcomes of this?
I mean, we want to see a change at a societal level. And, I think that's the same for any advocate in this space and for any activist in this space. We all actually have a common goal. Why gentle advocacy matters is, at least in my experience, I find that whilst it is an investment of time and resources, and it's a long game, you're not going to see change overnight. It's the change that can really make the most difference. That's not to say that there isn't a place for activism in the right space at the right time. Sometimes you do need that loud wake-up call and that call to arms, as it were, to highlight really pivotal, time-sensitive issues. And there are needs for sometimes that advocacy to be really more forceful when there's a lot on the line in a short time. But for us, we sort of see gentle advocacy as the way to sort of build that lasting change, and to really sort of provide the support there so that when more forceful advocacy and activism occurs, that there is an open ear to say, yeah, actually, I know about this issue, and this is something that they're saying that is important and that we should pay attention to. So it's not trying to do away with some of that advocacy and activism. It wants to, support that and give it a platform.
Totally. And, I think like what we were saying before we jumped on the podcast here, there is, we're seeing, especially with social media and all that now, you can probably say it's a lot easier to advocate for, certain things that you support type of thing. But, we're probably seeing a lot of sometimes advocacy done in a way that is almost bad for what we're trying to work towards. Would you agree with that?
It's a difficult thing to sort of get into. I don't think there's advocates who go in really trying to tear down the very thing that they're trying to stand for. I think people are coming in with the best of intentions, but sometimes that lands in a way that ends up creating that outcome that wasn't the intention at all, and ends up creating the opposite effect. And that's problematic, because obviously that's not what we want, and it's certainly not what people want. And I understand and I commend the passion of some of these advocates. They care about this. This is something that's really deeply personal and deeply emotional, and they want to express that, and they want to express it in a way that is consistent with their lived experience and how they interact and see the world. And it's perhaps one of the fundamental points of conflict between divergent people and neurotypical people is that we see the world differently and we react to information differently. And, this comes back to Damian Milton's work around the double empathy problem, that, we have different ways of thinking, seeing, and knowing. And sometimes that's just going to butt heads and create friction and create conflict where, there's not the intention to do so, but it happens. And, that's where I sort of feel gentle advocacy has a chance to try and say, okay, let's stop. And as a gentle advocate, you want to try and think, okay, can I try and understand how that other person is seeing the world, and how can I engage them in a way that they can come to the table on this? I'm not saying that, neurodivergent people have to do all the work. That's not the intention there. But it comes back to Milton's work to say, if anything, society has to come to the table.
Totally. Like the biggest thing I've had, and don't get me wrong, when I first hit like the advocacy space, I was gung ho. I was like this and that, and but what I learned was that doesn't get you anywhere. People were probably looking at me like, man, this guy's crazy, So I really needed to step back to really start to sometimes step in the shoes of others. This is my experience, because I would, and we spoke about this before, right? How people may use certain terms which may not be to the T correct as to what it is in the neurodiversity space, right? Yeah. But at least these people are acknowledging it. So if someone doesn't get something completely right, rather than tear shreds off them, especially if they're neurotypical who are really trying to help the cause, man, we should be helping. We should be behind these people and really supporting them, or even trying to help them understand it a bit better.
I think that tendency to sort of just shout down other people in the room comes less from advocates and more just the average person in the community. I think most advocates, after a while, if they try that approach, are going to find out pretty quickly, how badly it works. But I think gentle advocacy is something I think is a good message to push out to the general community as well, and not just people in the advocacy space.
Yeah,
I'm reminded of. Have you ever guys ever heard of what was his name? Daryl Davis?
No, I haven't.
He's an African American fellow in America who has convinced 200 Ku Klux Klan members to give up their robes. Not that there's an equation between these two situations, but he did that through sitting down with them and talking to them and doing most of the things that you're talking about, connecting with them, understanding where they're coming from, and just gently guiding them towards the right place. I think there's a lot of examples like that out there of gentle advocacy, being demonstrably a good way to go about it.
Totally. And I think that actually goes really well into our next question here. How should leaders in our space practice gentle advocacy?
I think you have to start with understanding. And this is something I learned as an advocate in other spaces, is you can't go into a meeting or an opportunity for advocacy without doing your research. It's important to try and understand as best as possible the perspectives and the lived experiences of the people that you're going to engage with, because that's going to give you the information you need to engage with them in that gentle space, to find, okay, what's their perspective and how might my arguments resonate? The example, going back to that Arts Advocacy Day, I had to once go into a congressman's office in the US and try and make the case around why the arts should be funded. And this was a congressperson who wasn't really on the side of arts funding. And I knew that. I'd done my research and went, I'm not going to win that argument if I go in there and say, hey, you should fund the arts. But I knew that they were somebody who cared about, government overreach and taxation, which is pretty dry, but there was actually a bill coming up around taxation and tax deductibility. And, that was going to impact the arts, impacting people being able to do that. But there was the common ground, because I could say, well, let's talk about taxation. Here's some of the impacts that this bill might have, not just on the arts, but other areas as well. And, we want to sort of see people have the opportunity to support the causes that they want to support. And so you find that common ground. And this is where I say it's a long game. You can have that conversation and find that common ground. Sometimes that's the first thing, and you don't even broach the subject of what you want to advocate for, but you build that relationship. And then maybe next time you can sort of squeeze the door open a little further to what you're trying to say, and eventually work to that. Now, the challenge for leaders is that we operate in a very time-poor environment, and it's just getting more and more the case that people, feel pressure to have to move fast. But a quality of great leadership that I've seen is the ability to step back and really observe the situation and orient yourself around, okay, what's the information that I have that I don't have? What are the possible options that I can take, and then decide on that and then act. And that's a really important part of gentle advocacy, because you have to sort of step back for a second and think and observe and take that information in before moving.
Yeah, no, it's it's interesting. It's definitely a long game. You're definitely right about that, because I think when I first stepped into really trying to push forward around neurodiversity, at first it was more about dyslexia. At first, I didn't even know what neurodiversity was at first. You know what I mean? I had to learn about it, all that type of stuff. But and I remember this is going back years ago now, going into organizations and even going to networking events and talking about this. Back in those days, neurodiversity was unheard of. You know what I mean? But now we're walking in there, and people have some type of understanding, or they want to learn more about it. So that's from years of talking to people, growing, other people like yourself and other people in the community really putting themselves out there to really make that. It's definitely been a long game. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of people think education is just yelling the facts at people, but sometimes it's just spending that time and talking to them and letting it seep in gradually in a natural way that they can better take in.
Yeah, totally. Now, what are some examples of people or organizations who have done gentle advocacy well? Do you know of anyone, or you've seen it, or what is your thoughts?
Well, I'll always fly the flag for Reframing Autism. I think they've done a great job of setting themselves up for success in gentle advocacy in the way that they try and approach their work. And it is, I think, starting to bear fruit. But there are, and I did really sort of think about this question, some of the best people who do gentle advocacy are the people you don't see. They're the people behind the scenes. There's some really great articles out there about some of the work that goes into peacemaking and diplomacy, and how you get, warring factions to a table to hash out a ceasefire. That takes a lot of gentle advocacy. It's just, we don't see that. It's a lot of people who work in the background, and it reminds me that, particularly in my work as a consultant, we tend to be quite extroverted, or at least we can put on extroversion when we need to. But one thing I've learned about leadership is that whilst there's this stereotype of the leader as this dominant personality that's out there, so some of the best leadership comes from people who are sometimes in the background and, leading from behind is sometimes what it's called, and providing the encouragement to others to be able to achieve success for them, and not taking the credit. And those are the kinds of leaders that perhaps don't get the credit that they deserve. And it's sort of hard for me to even sort of think of a really ready example of a leader who operates in that mindset. Some people might go to say Mandela, but Mandela was as much an activist,
especially his early years too.
Yeah, and this is where I sort of say you can't throw out activism. There is a time and place for activism when it's time critical, when there are real issues that need to be raised because there are lives at stake and there are livelihoods at stake. Then sometimes that's the right strategy.
Yeah, totally.
And, he pushed that, but you sort of see Mandela in office that he was more of that sort of gentle leader to try and encourage people to the table to talk and discuss it and find that common ground with people. And
some of those groups of people that he would have had to bring together at that time too. I mean, I'm amazed that he achieved what he did.
Well, and the thing with him as well was that, like you said, he brought together people who, for years hated each other. Some of these people had murdered like people's families and that, and he was able to somehow bring these people together and help them see forgiveness, which is unthinkable. You know what I mean? Especially in a country that has dealt with all of that.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so there's people and organizations out there. It's just that, many of them just work behind the scenes and do all that great work.
Totally. Photon John, do you have anything else you wanted to say on any of this stuff, mate?
No. The more we talk about it, the more you can think that. I mean, there are just really good examples that you can look at as to why this works. I'm amazed that it's not more. The people don't think like this more commonly in general, given how many examples there are of how great it can be or effective.
It's hard. It does take a lot of energy. It does take work and
patience.
We only have so many hours in the day, so many resources personally. And, if you've got other things on your mind and other priorities, it's very easy to sort of just go the path of least resistance, which can be going straight into something headlong, because that's all the energy you got. That's where I really sort of sympathize with that, because it is not easy. And, if gentle advocacy were easy, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah, true.
And I think it comes, like you said before, it's this time factor thing. It is, pardon me, it is a long haul, right? It's not something that is going to be done overnight. So, you do have to, and this is the thing, you do need to build relationships. You do need to influence people, and that stuff can take time. You don't want to be pissing off people, because sometimes those people you're pissing off could be the people that you need the most, type of thing, And
I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'd have to control your own emotions to an extent too, because sometimes these people that you're trying to move into the right place before they're there might piss you off throughout the process.
Sometimes you do have to hold your tongue, and sort of going back to some of the conversation earlier around the right language. Let's be clear, language matters. The words that we use can influence people. Part of my background, because it's all over the place, I'm a trained actor. And we know about the power that words have to change emotions, to change minds, and get it wrong, and you can put somebody on the wrong path or give them the wrong idea. And I think it's especially true as neurodivergent people, because the way that we use words can be very different to other people, and how we're interpreted, we become acutely aware of how our words affect people. And so we are sensitive to that. And so language does matter, and it does take a lot of energy to be able to sort of not lose it, because, and it is infuriating sometimes. I see it every day where somebody might just say something flippantly and you just go, oh, no. But I try to sort of think and go, is there a teaching moment in here? Or is there an opportunity for me to say, and sort of say, it might be better to say something like this, or, some people can get offended by this.
And you've hit the nail right on the head there, right? Like, because I think sometimes, especially when we're using certain types of language, for example, people may not realize that the language that they're using is incorrect. Do you know what I mean? They might be thinking that what they're using, they're actually trying to be quite supportive and, respecting us, sort of thing. But then if we rip them a new one, go, oh, what have you done? Rah, rah, rah. That can be really bad within itself. So like you said, educating someone, hey, look, maybe, actually we should be approaching this because of this, how many times have you heard people say, oh man, I guess we're all a little bit dyslexic, or we're a little bit autistic and stuff like that. And they sometimes say it in a way that they're trying to be respectful and that, but it's like, dude, you have now in my head, I'm thinking,
but if you go at them for it, they might think that it's not worth the effort to try it anymore.
Yeah, they might be like, man, these people are nuts.
and you've just highlighted a sort of classic example, because this is one of those situations where, thinking about where that person might be coming from on it, they're trying to find a common ground to empathize with you and sort of say, no, I think I understand that experience. I want to understand that experience. And here's, a common situation, but they're not realizing that, well, yes, it's a common situation, but that's not necessarily the full gamut of the lived experience that you have as a dyslexic person, or I have, or Kev has as autistic people. But it is one of those situations where you kind of say, well, it's not really the case, but, I'm glad that, you can at least understand that little window into what it's like. Let's start there, and then leave that door open a crack and sort of say, well, that's one thing, but here's some other things, and that's why it's different. But going back to some of that language thing, I do a lot of work in the disability policy space, and there's a similar conversation there around language. Do you call a person with disability or a disabled person? And it's actually a very difficult thing to navigate. And ultimately, what I've settled on is saying, well, ask the person. Ask the person how
That's
they
such a good point.
It's individual,
Yeah.
I know lots of people in a workspace, especially. I sort of had to personally, for myself, come to terms with it that I had a disability in certain areas. There were certain things that I just couldn't do, and I had to accept that to stop burning out and to be more productive and to figure myself out better and come to terms with myself. But I know many other people would despise having that term attached to them, and that's fine too. That worked for me. That helped me understand myself better and my limitations, and what I was good at.
Totally.
Yeah, and point out a great point that some people may not want to label because they've got so much trauma and an internalized stigma that they've been brought up with that they don't feel comfortable with that, and that's got to be respected, because they're trying to live the best life that they can and try and navigate that with the way that they're experiencing and seeing the world.
Totally. I just might Kate McGeary, I'm pretty sure I've pronounced the name correctly. Do you know Kate?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, great job. So I just thought I'd put it up here. Great conversation and questions on gentle advocacy, as well as touching on burnout earlier in the chat. Huge amount of respect and admiration for Gerard and his work. Awesome session, guys. Thank you, Kate.
Oh,
hey, by the
Kate.
way, yeah, Kate's going to be coming on the podcast. I think around August. I'm laughing because, like, man, we're banking up so many people, but it's going to be really cool to have her come on. So, Kate, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. But which one are we up to? I think we're here. Hang on. What is? Have we said some examples? No, we've said some examples of organizations. So, where could people find help to learn and become a more gentle advocate? Is there a place that they could go to, or where could be some good plan about it?
I did have a think about this, and there's not, to my mind, like an easy book that I could recommend. I mean, there's some great books on self-advocacy for autistic people. The work by Barb Cook and Yen Perkis, for example, sort of starts to come from that self-advocacy perspective and how to be able to make that case for self-support. And that's a good place to start. I think one paper that I sort of encourage all people to read, neurodivergent or neurotypical, is Damien Milton's paper on double empathy. And if you're not up for reading the really academic version, Reframing Autism has done a research summary of it that puts it into plain English for the rest of us.
Hey, sorry, can you just say that name again? Because I don't think our listeners would have heard you say it. I'm only joking here, man. You've shouted them out heaps today, man. So awesome stuff, man. Hey.
So we've done that because that is a good starting point. And I think one of the key things around Milton's work on double empathy was that whilst it was grounded initially in the context of the autistic lived experience, people have come to realize that it actually covers a huge amount of other lived experience. And in fact, one of the ways that I came across Milton's work was working with a good friend and former workmate of mine who's an Aboriginal Australian, and I had made an offhand comment about the progressive change for Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Island people in Australia. And I had framed it in a way that I thought was positive, but from his lived experience perspective, it came across as minimizing that lived experience. And, he could and was well within his rights to call me out and go, hey, that's not appropriate. But he actually taught me a lesson about gentle advocacy because he stepped back. He had a thought and went, no, that's one lived experience. How can I teach him about my lived experience and why, what I said may have had some basis in fact, but it still wasn't the right thing to say. And, we had that conversation and we both emerged from it more in much better positions. We had a better understanding of each other. And this is where that double empathy problem came in. We were seeing the world through very different lenses. And that was the crux of it. And by having that conversation, we were able to, for that moment, see things through each other's eyes and go, oh, okay, we both get it now. And that's changed my understanding significantly. And that's really what gentle advocacy is about, finding those opportunities to see the world through different perspectives.
Such an awesome point. You explained that perfectly, man. Out of curiosity, sorry, Photon John, did you have anything else that you wanted to contribute to that, or?
No, I was just sponging that up. That was a really good example.
Yeah,
I was going to ask what double empathy was. So
yeah, cool. What advice would you give to advocates? So if there's someone out there and they're thinking, man, this is a really good interview or something like that, what would be some advice you might like to give to some people?
I think number one, and this comes from all the advocacy I've done in other spaces, in policy spaces, you've got to take the time to do the research and understand the people you were talking to. It doesn't matter what space you're working with. If you can take that time to really learn about what motivates that person, what are the issues that drive them, what are the things that they want, and you can find a way to link that with what you're trying to say, that puts you at an advantage in terms of being able to say the right things to build that relationship. The challenge is that takes time, and that sort of brings me to the second piece of advice, is that this does require patience. As much as we would love to see a more thoughtful world, it's not something that's going to happen straight away. We've got to work at it, and it's going to take time. As long as we keep trying to move things in the right direction and we work together and understand where our common cause is, we will achieve that momentum. And I do believe in that, that we will achieve change because we can see the change. Sometimes we can stop and look back and go, you know what? We haven't solved all the problems. There's still a lot of work to do, but we've done something, and we've made that difference. And sometimes that can be a real motivator to keep going. When some days you sort of wake up and just go, oh, you'll see something in the media, somebody's come out,
feeling.
You're just face in your hands. Why do we do this? It is something that takes time, but we work with each other, and I think that's the third bit of advice, is that let's work together as a community. As I sort of alluded to earlier, there is a time and a place for activism. There is a time and a place for that more forceful advocacy when something needs to be done, and there's an urgency to it. Sometimes you do have to raise your voice and you do have to get out there. With gentle advocacy, it's the long game, and it's really sort of thinking about, okay, what can we do to create that environment that when we need to do that forceful advocacy, when we need to do that, strong action, that it's got the best chance of success. It kind of has to work together.
Totally. Man, you know what? You have opened my mind up to such an important topic to myself. Photon John, did you have anything else you wanted to add on to that?
No, I did just see Kate's last comment, though, about the difference between advocate and ally, maybe for those who might not understand the difference.
Yeah, it's a... I even struggle with the definition sometimes. I think an ally can be somebody who can be a supporter to people and support a cause and be quite vocal. And sometimes they are capable of being advocates in the situation because they've got the ability to step into conversations and open doors. And I think that's where allies can be really exceptionally helpful, is opening the doors. The challenge with an ally is not to be the advocate all the time. It's about having that humility to step back and let those with the lived experience of that issue and that cause to then step up and lead. If anything, an ally has to be the paragon of the gentle advocate, because they need to know when to step back and let others lead. But that said, you can be an ally and be an advocate. And that's why it's a very difficult thing to distinguish, because there's no hard and fast line between the two. I just saw Kate's other question in there about sort of advocacy and activism. And again, the line is not hard and fast. There are some advocates who sometimes do become activists because that's what's needed at the time. It's then how you do that. My experience is that, activism becomes problematic when it's not working as intended. It's becoming, it's a powerful tool, but like any powerful tool, if it's wielded incorrectly or haphazardly, it can end up causing more damage. And that's, the best advocates that I've worked with are the people that know when to be an activist and when to be a forceful advocate and when to just gently nudge in the background, and they can switch seamlessly. And they're the people that I sort of admire and respect,
Awesome.
who can balance those tensions, because it requires different ways of working to get that right.
Totally. Man, it has been such an awesome chat having you on the podcast today. You've spoken so in depth into some areas there. You've explained some things really great. Now, if some people want to connect with you or find some of the work you're doing, where's the best place to be able to find some of the things you're doing, my man?
So I'd sort of put a shout out to reframingautism.org.au.
Why not? One last time.
That's really the big sort of bunch of resources. I can't take credit for it. It's really the hard work of the team there. If you want to connect with me personally, I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my social media time. I have a series on there that I'm sort of trying to get going, which is called How I Work Neurodivergently. So really showcasing just the breadth of ways that people approach work and some of the ways that people have found to help themselves get that work done. And hopefully it's a place where people can go look and say, oh, that's a really cool idea. I might incorporate that into my work. Or, as a little teaser to this week's entry, I've got somebody whose work office is the back of her car. Like, she opens up the boot, pulls out the laptop and works remotely. And, she makes it work, and she makes it work well. And she makes myself and my colleagues jealous when she calls into a video chat and she's got this beautiful wilderness landscape.
Why not?
It's a total flex. I love it. And
awesome stuff.
You're going to hear from her this week about how she does that and how she makes it work for her.
Cool. Well, awesome stuff, man. If you guys are listening, definitely connect with Gerard. He's doing some awesome stuff there. Photon John, did you have anything else you wanted to do before we close off today?
No, thanks, Gerard. You've really sort of eloquently put everything today. I think reality is often a little more complicated than people would like it to be, and I think that's why Gentle Advocacy is approaching reality, because it's taking the time to understand and really consider things. And I think that was just excellent. Thanks for coming on.
Oh yeah, awesome, Gerard.
Thanks for having me.
Not a problem, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. And for everyone listening, if you haven't already done so, please follow, subscribe, and like to our social media platform. Please check out the OpenHeartedSociety.com website or check us out on all available podcasts. My name's Will Wheeler. I'm joined with my main man, Photon John. Gerard, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you till next time. See ya.